然后今天晚上呢，我非常高兴的这个隆重的介绍给大家，也推出我多年合作的一个非常好的一个合作伙伴Don 先生哈。Don 呢是在普林斯顿的这个招生委员会工作了31年曾经也是前普林斯顿助学金办公室的主任他这个在我朋友给我介绍他的时候，特别提到了他对我们美国的整个的 financial aid 的这个 landscape。和这个政策的制定是有一个非常决定性的一个角色的他做了重大的贡献同时他也是普林斯顿 No Loan 政策的制定者，他同时也是 College Board 的理事，还入选过大学奖学金服务的名人堂。那今天晚上他跟我们分享的这个主题呢是 How those Ivy League School Admission and Committee 他们是如何挑选和 evaluating 学生的那么今天晚上就非常荣幸的把这个时间交给 Don. So Don, if you can open up your mic and also share your screen, I will stop sharing my screen and I give the floor to you. We are all looking forward for your information sharing. Thank you.
All right, well, thanks for coming out tonight. It's 9 o'clock here on the East Coast, and I think some of you are probably all the way on the West Coast, so 6 o'clock, but nevertheless, thanks for coming. And I'm going to talk to you about the next 35 or 40 minutes, basically how Ivy League does admissions, how the admissions committee evaluate and decide which students to admit, but also in particular how I do that, which actually connects. So it's kind of one and the same thing, how the Ivy schools do things and how I do things, which is basically the same thing because of my background and training at Princeton. So let me go ahead and see how this goes. Okay, so I think, I don't know how much Sophia covered, but I served on the admissions committee and directed the Office of Financial Aid for 30 years. I was the architect of Princeton's no loan program. We started that years ago, and fortunately for students, a lot of other colleges have followed that. Had some various national positions, and one of them probably of most interest to you would be I was a trustee of the College Board, and along with a few other things. So anyway, I have a background. I think it's more longevity and ability, but I've seen the high level admissions from a number of different points of view, and I think I'm familiar with it. When I left Princeton 15 years ago, rather than retire, I decided that I would move over into what's called independent college counseling. In other words, a group of us around the country basically provide that extra kind of service that's needed, particularly for high ability students going to selective colleges. That's kind of beyond the level that the high school guidance counselor can give, because they are usually loaded down literally with hundreds of students. In my case, I have a maximum of 20 students in a class, so I can pay more attention and work with them more closely than the guidance counselor in a high school could. Okay, so that's a little bit of background. So my method, as I say, it duplicates what an admissions office does. I play the role of admissions officer at all the applicants' colleges. And we all basically do the same thing. There are some local variations, but colleges essentially use a numbering system on the academic side, and they use a number on the what I call the personal side. So based on the student's ability and interest, I give guidance to students who become the best possible applicant. I use a proven method, 16 years worth, as I mentioned, I've been doing this, to compare the student's overall performance with the selectivity of the college. So we got two sides of this coin. One is, what is the student like in all the different ways, and what does the college look for in the student, and decide where that student is admitted. So I accurately judge a student's admissions chances at each college, and I adjust the list as necessary to provide balance between reach, match, and safety schools. And then this last part is actually quite important. I advise students on how to most effectively use ED1, early decision 1, EA, early action, ED2, early decision 2, rolling and regular application options to increase admissions chances. So once everything is said and the student has done all this, the application is ready to go, there's still a major decision to be made, is which of these admissions plans will give me the best chance to be admitted at the schools that I want to attend. Okay, so basically with my clients, I am the admissions officer at all their schools. So step 1, I receive input documents from the student, including the most recent transcript, a questionnaire, It gives me a complete picture of the student's ability and accomplishments, both inside and outside the classroom. Then we have a meeting, initial meeting, to fully understand all aspects. The transcript and the questionnaire gives me a good idea. Make notes on that, and then we talk to the family and the student directly. We talk about academics, activities, any unusual circumstances surrounding the situation. Obviously, COVID and its effect was one that happened recently. The possible major, colleges of interest in making up a college list. And the input is important from both the student and the parent. It's a family situation here. And when I do a session, certainly the student is there, and in most cases, both parents. I don't like to deal with the parents alone or with the student alone initially, because I really think it's a thing where all the parties have to have a say and give their opinion. So step two, after we have this information, we have the initial meeting. As I say, I do an admissions officer evaluation of the student's academic and personal performance thus far. And what I use essentially what I learned to do in Princeton. You rate applicants and determine who will be admitted. And once I do that with my students, what I do is whatever that initial rating is on the academic and the personal side, this is the baseline from which what kind of improvement can we make in order to bring maybe what it might have been a reach college initially into maybe the match area, okay? So the initial meeting, the initial rating establishes a baseline on which to advise the student on how to improve both academic and personal rating as much as possible before the application time goes, okay? By the way, I see a picture of Nassau Hall over there. I don't know how many of you have been to Princeton, but that's the main campus building. So how do colleges determine who to admit? Colleges rate applicants on academic and personal scales. Because there's so many applications, they use a numbering system. My counseling method is 2 is a low number and 8 is a high number on both the academic and personal scales. This is similar to what I learned at Princeton, which uses a 1 to 5 system. We both use pluses and minuses. Harvard does a 1 to 6 system. Dartmouth does a 1 to 9, and so it really varies. But fundamentally, there is enough of a numeric spread to be able to make some distinctions on both the academic side and on the personal side. And in my case, in the Princeton case, we use pluses and minuses attached to whatever the rating was. Academics are weighted somewhat more heavily than personal. Notice I use the word somewhat here. It might surprise you that if you take the top 20, 30, 40 colleges, the ratio between how much academics counts and how much the personal counts is about 60% academic and 40% personal. What's the reason for that? The reason is that most of the applicants are very good students, have good SAT scores, have various things. So they're rather closely bunched as far as their academic ability goes. And so the decisions often come down to what else have you done to make yourself the type of person we want to see on our campus? Oh, do you have a talent? Have you been participating in activities? Do you have leadership? Do you have volunteer work? What do your teachers say about you? Things like that. So all that goes into the personal side. So we've got academic and personal, a numeric rating system attached to each side, and that's the way we judge the students and classify them, okay? So the evaluation, I'll give you an example of how this works. The evaluation and college comparison system for sample student John. So I hope you can see this. I'm an admissions officer at Princeton, let's say, wherever, and I'm a new hire, and I have this up on my wall. It's how my school does and gives an academic rating. Okay, I say they do vary, but the system I use with my students is 2 is a low number and 8 is a high number. You can see that in red, I hope, on the left-hand side. Now I look to see what are the categories on which I make these numeric ratings. The first column is unweighted GPA. Next column is rank in class. Next column is the course level that we take the 5 solids, okay? Now, we use unweighted, and each college, as for the most part, does their own weighting system. The reason they do that is high school weighting averages are very unreliable because they use all kinds of different systems. They might do a certain weight for AP, a different one for honors. Some I know do the same weight for honors and AP. Some do a 6-point scale, some a 5-point scale, whatever. So unweighted GPA is how we start. Rank in class is helpful to have, and then we weight based on the actual course level, which means we look at the AP course, the honors courses, the IB course, things like that. We make a judgment about how difficult the student schedule is. The next column is SAT, then ACT composite. Next column is AP exams listed on the application. So if they're on the application, it means it's the end of the junior year because we won't see the end of senior year results. Okay, so we're talking about end of junior year. And there used to be in the College Board something called subject tests. Okay, they did away with those 2 years ago. And now in admissions, we look to the AP exams, the number taken, and the results that the student gets as a substitute for the subject test. And on the right-hand side would be academic awards of various types: National Merit, AP Scholar, National Honor Society is one. It's not a high one, but it's a good one to have. Maybe a science contest winner, things like that. Okay, so that's on the right-hand side. So as an example of how the system would work with John, let's say John is an academic 6. Now, we put that right across. I hope you can see it in blue. He's got an A- average, unweighted. He's taking senior year something like 3 AP and 2 honors courses, which we call very demanding. He's got a 1450 SAT. If he took the ACT, he's got a 31 or 32. And by the end of junior year, he's taken 3 or 4 AP exams and gotten 4s and 5s. And as far as an academic award, let's say he's an AP Scholar with distinction. Okay, so that I want to give you a feel for what an academic 6 on a scale of 2 8 looks like. Okay. Now, I'll mention this later on, but in practice, students rarely go right across one row like that. They might have a higher average and a lower course level, or the SAT may be here, whatever. So normally this ends up being an average of the different boxes, but in this case, we're just saying he goes right across, and everything in this student's case is an academic test. So in the computer, wherever it used to be when I did in the folder, we put down A6 for John, academic 6. Now we want to give John a personal rating. It's not quite as straightforward. It's more subjective. It's based on a combination of factors: achievement, talent, leadership, the essay, volunteering, and if there's any obstacles the student had to overcome, that would be considered. When the student asks the teacher to write recs and the counselor recs, this is the type of thing that they actually check off. There's a box where they check things off. Respect accorded by faculty, class participation, academic achievement, intellectual promise, writing quality, so on and so forth. And in addition to that, then they also write as far as a written evaluation of the student, but checklist first and then a written evaluation. And this goes to make up with the personal rating. So this one is somewhat more subjective, as I say. There's on the left is the 2 to 8 system, numbering system. We're looking at the first column at non-academic achievement, which is school group activities. And it goes from 2, which is very little or none, to basically 8, which would be international or national. Next one would be talent, individual talent, music, athletics, acting, whatever it happens to be. Then we've got other achievement in the middle column, which is things you do outside of school. Service to others would be volunteer work. Leadership would be the next column, elected, appointed positions, peer group, different things like that. And then on the right is a catch-all of what type of person is this. Okay, this is actually very important. And here would be a number of things. It would be the students' essays. I say usually there's a main essay plus some supplementals. It would be the teacher recommendations. It would be the guidance counselor's report and recommendation. If they get an outside recommendation, it would be part of that. And then if they go for an interview, that would be in there, and maybe some other things. So that is basically, what is a student like? What is the student's values? And do we want that type of person or institution? So a little more on what these categories are, because this is a cluttered slide before. So non-academic achievement, school activities. You can see group activities such as government, newspaper, debate, theater, music, and athletics. Talent would be individual talent, same thing, music, art, theater, dance, creative writing, athletics. Other achievement, as I mentioned, is outside of school, such as scouting, religious, club, sports, and employment. Service to others would be volunteer work of all different types, disadvantaged, elderly, hospital. Leadership would be positions of responsibility, elected or appointed positions. And then the personal characteristics that I mentioned, your guess of how your teachers and counsel would rate you on traits like respect accorded by faculty, work habits, maturity, so on and so forth. Basically the same categories you saw in that recommendation slide that I showed you. Okay, so that is then, we'll go back up here. So now we're going through this the same way we did the academic rating on a 2 to 8 scale. Now here I made the darker blue at the 4 level. Without going, so a 4 is a typical busy high school student on a scale of 2 to 8, okay? Let me describe what a 4 looks like on my numbering system. The student would be, let's say, in student government, part of the robotics club, and plays tennis, free activities. Good, the student is a varsity tennis player, so his talent is good. Other achievement would be the summertime, stays busy, he's a camp counselor. John, he did a business intern because you might be thinking about doing business or economics, and he holds down a job. Service to others, he spends about 40 or 50 hours a year going to a dog shelter most every Saturday morning, okay? Leadership, he's vice president of his class, that would be the good level. And over on the right, we think generally the type of things I talked about, the recommendations, the essays, so on, are at the very good level. So picture of 4, much like you pictured the 6 academic, picture of 4 personal, as a busy, engaged high school student, not average and not a superstar, okay? So a 4 is a solid personal rating. So let's go on here. So in this example, John has an admissions rating of academic 6 and a personal 4. So I would give him an overall rate of 10 plus with the academics counting a little bit more, 6 plus 4 with a little bit of extra for the academic. So this shorthand will be how he is known in an admissions office. For example, at Princeton, he might say, I have a 10 plus from Princeton High School. Now their numbers are slightly different, but nevertheless, this numbering system becomes the handle with which they talk about students and the location where they come from, okay? So now this last one is pretty important. The key question is, what does being a 10 plus admissions rating mean about John's admissions chances? Okay, so we got 1/2 the equation here. I hope I've explained it fairly carefully. Now we've got to stack that up against the selectivity level of colleges. So the system I use, I have 2,000 four-year colleges rated from 4 to 14 on the same scale that I rate students. So I have a basis for comparison. In this example, colleges rated a 10 would be a match for student for John. So if John's a 10, the college a 10, we would put it in a match column. Colleges with higher ratings, 11 or a 12, would be called reaches, more difficult to get in because the college number is higher than John's number, okay? And then colleges with lower ratings would be on the safe side where John's number rating is higher than the college rating. And then we would go call those safeties, okay? Now, based on about 4,000 comparisons between students and colleges, this numeric system that I use is a proven way to make a realistic college list, which I think is a very important realistic college list. So anyway, I've been doing with about 400 students, average 10 colleges per student. So that's where the 4,000 number comes from. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So John was a 10 plus, okay, we're going to round him off to a 10. Now on the left-hand side are college ratings. In this case, you can see 6, 7, 8, 9, up to 14. 14 is the highest level of college ratings that I have. Now John, if he's a 10, would match up on that 10 row. The 10 row is quite competitive. Which colleges in my system have a 10 rating? It ends up the University of Maryland and Bucknell are 10s in my system. Now, as John looks down and looks at how well he does with some matches and safeties, he's looking at competitive colleges who'd be so much stronger. Penn State and Fordham are 9s, so John's got basically 1 number above them in rating. Lightly competitive would be Rutgers and Syracuse, so now John's relatively stronger, and he's quite strong compared to 7s, James Madison, Miami, Ohio, and Ithaca and Rowan, which are rated 6s. However, it also goes the other way, obviously. And he's looking at 11, would be somewhat of a reach for him. 11 colleges would be Lehigh and UT Austin. 12s would be very selective, BU and Emory. 13s, most selective, Duke and Northwestern. At the very top are the 14s, super selective, Princeton, Stanford, Harvard, Yale, MIT, so on and so forth. I think I have about 8 or 9 super selectives. Now you can see from this, the 6-4 was solid academic. He was an A- student. He had a good SAT. He had a good schedule, whatever. So he matched and a solid 4 personal background. So he matches up with Maryland and Bucknell. Okay. Now, if you look up and at 12, 13s, and 14s, you realize that now the student really has to be a 7 or 8. Okay, because they're not going to add up there. And as you get even higher, this 4 certainly doesn't work. That the student would have to be something like a 7-5, academic 7, personal 5, which is the kind of 12, a little bit higher. Or look at the 13 and 14 on my scale. A 14 like Princeton, Stanford, the student has to probably be an 8, maybe a high 7, and cannot be either a typical high school student or a very good high school student. They have to do something above the 5 level and have a national, international characteristic honor of some kind. Okay, so it's not only the academics that make the super selective so hard, it's also that they have to do very strong things on a personal side. Okay, so I hope this is clear to you all as I go on and talk more about it. Okay. All right, so this is what I would do. John comes in. I said, John, as of the first pass, looks like you're a 6 and a 4 based on, let's say he's end of sophomore year, early junior year. So we have a little bit to go on, but it's certainly not going to be his final rating. So you're a 10 plus. Let's look at your preliminary college list. And then we would put the college in there. If he puts UMD and Bucknell would be his kind of match schools. And if he's a 10 plus and they're a 10, basically it's good choice, 40 or 60% to be admitted. As his number gets better with Fordham and Penn State, his chances go up to solid 50 to 70. Strong chance at Syracuse and Rutgers, and very good, excellent at James Madison and Miami, Ohio. So as you go to the right, obviously, it gets stronger towards the safety. As it goes to the left, it gets more difficult. Lehigh, UT Austin, BU and Emory are 12s, and Duke and Northwestern are 13s. You can see a 10 compared to a 13 really has very, very little chance at all. Okay? So now we talk about the college list in relation to his rating. As we go on, we try and increase the rating as much as we can, and we move the college list around as appropriate, adding and subtracting. Okay. So this is the student evaluation and college list making method that I use with my students. After the preliminary evaluation, I give guidance on how to best improve the student's academic and personal ratings. Through my counseling and John's efforts, perhaps he can become an academic 6 plus, go from 6 to 6 plus, and a personal 5, rather than a 4, he goes up to a 5. So in that case, he would go from a 10 plus to an 11 plus, which is a nice increase. So now what happens is those colleges to the left now move over 1 space to the right. So if he moved up that kind of level, if so, the 11 rated colleges that initially were somewhat difficult, Lehigh and UT Austin, now become good choices. They move a column to the right because John raised his rating a number, okay? And at 12s, BU and Emory, which are kind of far to the right, now at least move into the green core area. And the green core area is what we try and center the list around. In this case, it's orange on this slide, but what I use is basically a green color. So what we want to try and do as we go through all this is have the majority of the colleges in the somewhat difficult, good choice, solid chance area. And that's where most of the decisions will be made. 1 or 2 dream schools to the right may be okay, and safety schools are off to the left. 1 or 2 dream schools to the left, safety schools are off to the right. And I also should mention, this also serves as a way to judge merit scholarships. To the extent that the student's rating is 2 or more above the college, that means they're in the very top of the applicant group. And that is where college merit scholarships are given. Okay, and I'll give you an example of that later on. Okay, so let's go on. I hope I'm being clear with all this. So, added benefits of the system. The grid system gives guidance on where improvement is needed to achieve a higher rating. Examples, the student may have a high GPA, but a weak course level. Can he take honors or AP courses and maintain his GPA? Let's just go here. Let's go up to that grid. as I said here, rarely does a student go right across on one row. So this John may have an A minus average, but let's say he's taking just one honors course and regular courses. So he probably has a 4 rating at course level. So instead of having a 6, he probably is somewhere around a 5, averaging the 6 and the 4. And he wants to get that academic rating up a little bit and say, John, can you maintain that A minus and maybe take 2 or 3 honors courses and an AP and maybe senior year take a little bit more. Or the SAT might be low or high. So you can see how this averages out and the grid shows where improvement might be needed. Okay. And the same thing happens on the personal side. The student has a number of activities and some talent, but has done almost no volunteer work. What individual or group would he like to help? So same thing, say with this grid system, which is very helpful. When we did this explanation at Princeton, it was kind of a report and it was in words and you had to read through the whole thing. But this grid system is a simplified way to picture it. And in this case, know where to make some changes or improvements. So once again, I had John go right across the 4 in all these, but he might have major school activities at the 5 level. But if we go over to service to others, he might be only what is required or very little or none. So at least try and get the very little or none up to the 3 or 4 level. And now basically his 4 might become a 4 plus or a 5 minus. Okay. So anyway, the grid system is very helpful in making those kind of where improvements are needed. All right, let's see, no active. Okay, good. So another very important use of the evaluation system. In John's case, at 10 plus, he should be able to see that he essentially has no chance to be admitted to a 13 like Duke or Northwestern. Even if he improves to 11 plus, this still is not a very great chance. Okay, and I see this all the time. Over 16 years, I have found time and time again, usually independent of the student's ability, they tend to apply to the same top 50 colleges or so. Okay, so what it means is the statistics are very interesting. So many students apply to the top schools, and obviously they need to have a good academic and a good personal rating. And if they're typically academically and typically personal, they just, that's unrealistic. So the realistic list is really important to me. Okay. So my counseling philosophy: be encouraging but realistic. A well-balanced list is important. Perhaps 1 or 2 dream schools with the majority in the match and safety categories. I often hear from the student, from the parents, I won't know if I don't try. This system gives you a pretty good idea of what's going to happen for your dream schools, your READ schools. And the thing is, students, when they say that, they don't realize how bad they will feel when the decisions come in and they say deny, deny, deny. It really can affect the student in a major way. This kind of disappointment can stay with a student for a long time. And I have many examples. So try 1 or 2 dream schools, okay? But let's not overload that list with colleges to the left where you're not going to get very good results, most likely. Let's build the center, move a little bit to the left if you want to give it a try, and certainly move to the right with safety schools, particularly in a time of COVID, where all these colleges are getting more applications and their admit rates are dropping. So next, couple case studies to show you what this looks like. So here's Corey. When I first got him, academic 7, personal 4, 11 plus. Finally ended up with a 7 plus 5. So he went from a 11 plus to a 13 minus. That's a nice jump. Academically, we talked about it. I said, try for some academic honors beyond high school. I know you can do so well if you restrict yourself to high school. So we got into the New Jersey Governor Scholar Program, summer research program at Drew University. He took an online course with Columbia, I think through Coursera. And I said, a good math student said, why don't you try for the AMC, American Math Competition. He got a 12 rating on that, which is quite high. It's just below the top level. So that improved his academics. Personal, he sought a leadership position in HOSA, which is a future health professionals organization. And he had a major leadership role in New Jersey. He started a nonprofit using his magician skills. He was an amateur magician to entertain hospitalized children. And that was a big thing. He got into that. They went to a couple of different hospitals. And when you do something significant like that outside of school, oftentimes I suggest asking for a supplemental recommendation. So in addition to the school recommendations, it comes in from outside and it gives another sense of what the student is as far as being well-rounded and committing to helping others. And in case he was a swimmer, I said, why don't you work some more in your swimming times? Send him off to the Caltech coach. So he wasn't a Division I swimmer, but he lowered the times enough. So he was actually a Division III recruit. If you look down the bottom, he got in Penn ED, Caltech, he got in EA with a boost from the swimming coach. He got in Berkeley, UCLA, Rutgers Honors College, which is a high-level college at Rutgers with the best freshman class, okay? So you can see the ED was important to him at Penn because Penn is right between a 13 and a 14, okay? He ended up a 13 minus. On my system, and I do make adjustments, ED is worth a point on a student rating because you have basically a 10 or 15% greater chance to be admitted ED because you have to attend that institution if you are admitted ED. So you get a boost. So it's basically 13 minus really became like a 13 plus / 14, which is just where Penn is. Okay. So that ED was a good choice of a place to play that, what I call the ED chip. And he was admitted to Penn, obviously ED, so he attends Penn. Jennifer was initially an 11, 7 minus 4, ended up as a 12. Academic, after disappointing SAT, it took the ACT and scored a 34, so that moved her up. Made sure she had 5 AP results, so she got this AP Scholar with Distinction Award. So not a big jump, but important when you're up in the 7, 8 area. She went from a 7 minus to a 7. Personal, encourage her to expand her work with Engage project. It's a project that raised awareness about cervical cancer to a higher level. She was very involved in this. And I said, let's see if you can do more with that. She ended up speaking at national and international conventions. The last one was in Austria a while ago. And she was interested in kind of international foreign relations, which that of course helped there. But there's also a French test called DELF, and she was a very high level French speaker. And she took that French exam for native speakers and she passed it. So now look, she gets in George Washington School of International Affairs. So this has got a couple aspects to report. One is she's thinking about Georgetown. Georgetown's a 13. Chances are she's not going to quite make Georgetown. So she concentrates on GW. The finances were an important thing for her family. So in this case, as I mentioned before, George Washington's a 10, okay? He's a 12, GW is a 10. She's got her numbers too higher than GW, which means she's in that scholarship range. Generally, it can vary a little bit from college to college. So now she gets International School of Affairs, which is actually quite similar to Georgetown, with a $55,000 a year scholarship. Georgetown does not give merit aid, just need-based aid. And she also got in Rutgers, Rochester, Lehigh, and American. Okay, so this is a good example in a number of different ways. And I've got a third case study, Jasmine. The initial was 12, final was 12. The reason is she signed on in the summer after 11th, or it's just before 12th grade. So not a lot I can do when the application time was a month or 2 away. Sometimes maybe a little bit, but not a lot. So essay is a part of it. So she had a week first essay draft. We brainstormed for a better topic, got a better topic, I edited it, and I think the essay got to be a lot better than the first draft. We do a practice interview with my students, made suggestions during that for improvement, and I think she probably came across very well in her interview. Now, this is an interesting one. Changed from CS app major to undeclared, mentioning her many academic interests. Okay. Now, I can mention this later on, but I call it the headwind of STEM and CS and engineering school. Those majors, as an applicant, are filled with the top students in the total applicant pool. Now, if that's what you do well and that's what you want to do, go ahead, but realize that it's going to be more difficult to get in your colleges. They'll probably be running about a point higher with STEM and CS applicants, okay? In her case, it wasn't that big a thing with her. She just thought she preferred it. The other thing I want to point out here, besides helping her by not going against the STEM headwind, is it's her application major. She's not committing to whatever she says in undeclared. She mentioned academics or economics or whatever. She can, under art and science, she waits until her sophomore year to pick her major. So she's got a year and a half to get her feet on the ground. And it may be she's still could major in computer science or philosophy or history or whatever. But the main thing, my job is to get them in college. And in this case, not putting CS as her main application major would help her get in college, okay? So undeclared, mentioning a lot of interest, including computer science, I think is a better way to do it and improve their chances. We worked on our app strategy using ED1 and ED2 most effectively. She wanted to try a dream school, Columbia. She's at 12, Columbia's at 14, okay? So she wanted to try it. She probably got closer, but was denied. And now her second choice was Emory, which is at 12. And in times of COVID, it's a little bit more uncertain now. So it's not a bad idea to do ED2. We're still committed to attend. So I think that really helped probably bring her from 40% at Emory to 60% at Emory. And she did get admitted at Emory, okay? So anyway, you get an example of how the system works with these three students. Important note about case studies. My role is to advise students on what it takes to become a better applicant, possibly bring more college into play. It is up to the student's interest and ability for this to happen. Corey, Jennifer, and Jasmine are all fully engaged with my counseling and tried to do their best. As I told them, I can provide the map to your destination, but you must drive the car. And they were very good drivers, okay? So it's a combination of, most of it is the student, but I can help as much as I possibly can, but the student has to have a full buy-in and be really willing to basically work with me in order to achieve the type of results that you saw in the three case studies. Okay, so I think just a few more slides, probably another 5 or 10 minutes. I don't want to take forever here. The initial effect on COVID was with the class of 21, as you all probably know, was virtual schooling and things like that. Now students are basically, for most of this year, back in school, which is good. A lot of them weren't very comfortable with the online part of it. And in some cases, I saw grades dropping and things like that. However, some of the changes have continued for the class of 22 and 23 and still may be around for a while. The main one being test optional, okay? That is making a major change between admissions now and it was 2 or 3 years ago. So in the time of COVID and slowly coming out of it, unfortunately, this does seem like very slowly, there's less hard data and more variation in ratings. And I've tried to keep up with that as how I make these different adjustments that I do with my students. SAT, ACT are test optional, even test blind. University of California is what's called test blind. They don't want to see ACT or SAT at all. As a matter of fact, I think Caltech just went test blind. Most of the schools now are test optional, means if you send them, they'll evaluate them. If you don't send them, obviously they go without. No subject test was helpful, but now, as I mentioned, the AP exams become more important. More emphasis on transcripts, but grade inflation makes us hard to evaluate. It might surprise you, 55% of the high school grades are some version of A minus, A, or A plus. So now you're looking at a transcript and you're trying to make these distinctions between A minus and a B plus, or an A and an A minus and things like that. Okay. Hard to do in the case of test optional without something like the SAT or ACT score to give you some backup in order to interpret the grades, okay? As I mentioned, increased importance of AP courses and exams, increased importance of academic honors, like the National Merit has a commended level, semifinalist and finalist level. AP Scholar, 5 AP exams end of junior year, averaging 3.5 is AP Scholar with distinction. There's a couple other levels below that. Distinction is a good one to get. Science and business competitions, research projects, things like that. So that last category is pretty important. College is more and more trying to look for hard data when the SAT or ACT is not part of the equation, okay? And if you send it in, these kind of things help increase your academic rating. Extracurricular opportunities, COVID caused serious restrictions, canceled virtual only, with some carryover 21, 22. Fortunately for the class of 23 and after, most extracurriculars opened back up. So if you were a freshman or sophomore and things were kind of slow and you weren't able to do certain things, now is the time to get fully engaged in extracurricular activities, okay? Summary for selective colleges. Top 100, basically those that admit fewer than 30% of the apps. With test optional continuing, colleges have fewer data points to evaluate apps. Admissions decisions become more random, difficult to predict outcomes. Selective colleges are getting more apps, admit rates are falling. There are probably, I think there are almost 8 or 9 schools now with admit rates below 5%. Okay, before COVID, they were anywhere from 5 to 10% roughly. So more apps mean admit rates are falling. A couple of these might surprise you. NYU is up to 105,000 applications this last year. Northeastern, which 10 or 15 years ago had a 30% admit rate, had 90,000 applications and a 7% admit rate. Okay, Northeastern. Oftentimes it's not on people's radar scope as a highly selective college, but it keeps moving up every year. And my system is a 12, similar to Emory and similar to Boston College and a lot of others. UCLA, 150,000 applications. Okay, so they've got to get through these things in a limited amount of time. So it's pretty important that application be solid and consistent and to get a fair shake in the process. Okay, so now let me see. Selective schools getting more apps, increased concentration in certain majors. I mentioned this before. Computer science, engineering, and STEM students will face higher standards. If that's what you are really good at, there's not a lot of other options. Go ahead and do it, but realize you're going to have a deeper list with more match and safety schools because the admissions standards are going to be higher because of the quality of the pool. Okay, it's nice undeclared and some other subjects because the university has like 50 departments, even more. They've got to be able to they've got faculty members, they've got so much space, they've got curriculum, they've got to basically distribute these students around in a way that keeps all these different departmental chairmen and professors reasonably happy. And if you jam everybody in one department, they only can do so much with that. Okay, so at some point they have to say, okay, that's enough CS majors. Let's start looking for history majors, philosophy majors, whatever it happens to be. Okay, so I think I've said enough on that, but if you can balance your list with undeclared and all the things you like to do, including computer science or physics or chemistry, probably have a better chance of getting in than if you just stick to that as your application major. Okay, test option opens the door to admitting more students in diversity, equity, inclusion category, what's now called DI. This is a big one. Okay, this test optional has made a big difference in the last 2 or 3 years. Let me give an example. Most all these top colleges, top 50 or 60, they now have more of a commitment to this category than they had 2 or 3 years ago. These numbers aren't exact, but let's take Princeton as an example. 3 years ago, this category, let's say 15% of the admitted class. They admit about 2,000 students. Now it's roughly 25% of the class to admit all these different students. Okay, so that's going from 15 to 25% is 10% more out of 2,000. So that's 200 spots now that are going to this category. Now, what does it mean? It means 200 spots are taken away from some other place. Where are they taken away from? They're taken away from the students just below the very best. Okay, so the top students still get in, but there's other students who are very good and they would like to have, who can do the work, who might have been admitted 3 or 4 years ago. There's a squeeze on that group, and there's just not as much room for them as there was before this test optional and the DEI category. Okay, that's important to understand. All right, and which is why now when I do my system and a student is an 11, a college is 11, rather than say it's 50%, I'm normally saying it's about 40% because those colleges don't have quite as many spots for that type of student. So I've taken that into account. But it's here to stay for a while. I'm hoping another year or two that colleges, other MIT did it, goes back to requiring the SAT. My view, if Harvard does it, a lot of colleges will follow, but we'll just have to wait and see. I think it's good data. Even before they did away with it, colleges would look at the SAT in different light. They wouldn't take an absolute number for all different types of students. They know enough about background, low income, minority, that they could do it. So the SAT, ACT were very helpful. if it was looked at in context. And these good schools and good admissions people, they know how to look at the SAT in context. Okay. Okay. Final word. Hey, we're getting there. There's a heavy oversupply of applicants for relatively few colleges. 60% of all applicants apply to the top 50 colleges with their low admit rates. So these applicants have about a 1 in 6 chance of being admitted. Just in general, how do you make yourself stand out? Answer, with additional expert counseling that goes beyond what an overloaded high school guidance counselor has time to do. So this is a little bit of a plug, I guess, for how independent counselors and how much they can help, because they're spending time doing this with a limited number of students. And I say, in my case, I deal with 20 students. I know high school counselors have 200 and 300 students they're dealing with. So just a matter of experience and caseload, I think, can make quite a difference. And then final word. In my time at Princeton, besides doing admissions, I also was director of aid, so I can give guidance on merit aid and advise if it's worthwhile to apply for need-based aid. I also coach men and women's soccer. I founded a women's soccer program, and I moved over to the men's side, and I can give guidance on how college athletic recruiting works. Okay. And then I'm going to just end this thing with one more thing, because you're probably curious. My American-born Chinese students in the class of 22, those are going to start college this fall. Just quickly, 9 out of my 20 students were American-born Chinese. The colleges they went to were Toronto, also admitted to McGill and Rutgers Honors. Penn, also admitted to Caltech, Berkeley, UCLA, Rutgers Honors. UPitt, the special guaranteed pre-dental program with a scholarship. UCLA, also Rutgers, Colgate, Northeastern, USC. Babson, which is a business college. Princeton, also Georgia Tech, University of North Carolina, Yale, Rutgers, University of Washington, MIT. Rice, also Rutgers, Northeastern, Babson, RPI, Toronto, and Michigan. Rutgers again, and UIUC. Berkeley, Rutgers, NJIT, and TCNJ, 2 New Jersey schools. And so I just want to give you some sense of the mixture here. And I think overall, given the COVID and the things and a good number of kind of STEM type of students, I think the results are solid. I think most of the families were pleased. Okay, and now they're all up and about ready to get ready to start in another month or so their freshman experience.